Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping into a source that offers a pretty unique, spiritual take on financial freedom, outlining what it calls the divine keys to provision. You know that feeling of living paycheck to paycheck? It feels like no matter how hard you work, you just can't get ahead. Well, we're diving into a source that speaks directly to that struggle, but from a faith-based point of view. The material we're looking at today lays out a handful of biblical verses that it calls keys to unlocking financial peace. Our goal here is to really unpack these core ideas and see how this whole framework is put together. Okay, let's get into it. Here's our roadmap. We'll start with that common struggle we just talked about. Then, we'll walk through three main ideas: the divine source, a divine partnership, and the promised outcome. And finally, we'll see how the source says to put it all into practice. So right off the bat, the author hits on a super relatable problem, right? That feeling of being stuck on a financial treadmill. You're working, you're paying the bills, but you're just not making any real headway. This really sets the stage for the solutions that are about to be offered.
All right, let's get to the first big idea, this foundational principle. In this one, well, it's all about making a major shift in your mindset, a shift in where you believe your provision actually comes from.
The very first key presented is this verse from Philippians. It's used to establish God as what the author calls the ultimate provider. The idea is to completely reframe how you even think about financial supply.
So here's the crucial point being made. Financial security, it argues, starts with identifying the correct source. Your job, the economy, those are just channels. They aren't the well itself. That's the core idea here.
And building on that idea of the correct source, the text brings in this principle of priority, and it does so by quoting the book of Matthew. This really captures the heart of the argument. The source is saying that your financial outcome is a direct result of your primary focus. The stress comes from chasing the money itself, but the provision, well, that's said to follow when you prioritize your relationship with God instead. Okay, so we've talked about the mindset. The next set of keys shifts gears into what the source calls the principles of action. This is where we explore this idea of a partnership between divine power and our own efforts. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, how this verse from Deuteronomy is interpreted. It's not presented as just passively receiving money, but as being given the active ability to create it. The text draws a really sharp line in the sand here. This isn't a promise that money's just going to fall from the sky. No, it's framed as an active empowerment, giving you the ideas, the skills, the creativity, and the opportunities you need to actually generate wealth. From there, the material frames the next principle as a direct test of faith. And to make its point, it pulls out a pretty provocative verse from the book of Malachi. According to this framework, this verse on tithing is totally unique because it contains this explicit invitation to test God's promise. It's basically saying, go ahead, try it, and see if I don't pour out an overwhelming blessing. But the author is really careful to emphasize that the motivation here is everything. It's not presented as some kind of transactional, I give this to get that scheme. Instead, it's framed as a profound act of trust in the one who provided it in the first place. So, we've covered the mindset and the actions, but where does all this actually lead? Well, the next key focuses on the promised outcome, a vision of assurance for what happens when you apply these principles. The argument here is that the end game for all this financial provision isn't just about getting comfortable. It's about enabling something much bigger, something more outward-focused.
So the crucial point here is that abundance has a purpose that goes way beyond just you. This framework presents financial sufficiency as the thing that unlocks your ability to be generous, to bless others, and to perform what it calls good works.
And to really provide a deep sense of security, the text pulls out this verse from Psalms. It's framed as this lifetime testimony from King David, a huge figure in the Old Testament, speaking on God's unwavering faithfulness. This verse is really held up as a bedrock promise. It's presented as the ultimate assurance that those who, in the text words, walk with God, can rest easy, knowing they won't be left high and dry. Okay, so after all of that theory, you're probably asking, what do I actually do? Well, the framework wraps everything up by shifting from these big principles to a super practical three-step plan for daily application. And here's how the text suggests you turn these ideas into actual habits. It's a simple three-part cycle. First, you declare the promises out loud. Then, you pray for wisdom. And finally, you act. You keep your eyes open for opportunities and you manage what you have wisely. And at the end of the day, all these keys, all these steps, they all boil down to one central idea. Genuine belief has to be paired with real, tangible action to see the promised results come to life. And that leaves us with this final, thought-provoking question, one that really captures the entire proposition of the material we've just explored. It challenges the conventional wisdom about where financial wellness begins, and it proposes a completely different starting point.